It's your boy Bryan-Michael Cox, and you are now logged into YouKnowIGotSoul.com. This time, this is Bryan Cox, man.
Hey, what's up, Brian, man? How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. I'm hanging in there.
Just want to start off kind of, taking it back when you were with Noontime Productions and all that. Kind of talk about where you got your first break and how you got your start, basically.
Well, I mean, as people who follow me know that I'm from Houston. I was born in Miami, but I'm from Houston, Texas. And I went to Fulham High School. And while I was in high school, I met, a guy named Greg Curtis, who kind of took me under his wing and mentored me as a songwriter, producer. And of course, I went to high school with Beyonce and Latoya. And they gave me an opportunity early. And then I moved to Atlanta. I went to Clark Atlanta University, and there was a flyer, on the floor. It was like, noontime producers, if you look up a thing and beats, call this number, whatever. Called the number a bunch of times, actually, and finally got somebody on the phone, and they gave me an opportunity to intern, and then from there, Mooney, Chris, and Terry, and Ryan gave me an opportunity to on the team. So I did a publishing deal with Noontime early, and then from there, it just kind of, I met Jonte Austin early. I was 19, he was 16. I met Brian and Brandon Casey from Jagged Edge, and that's kind of where the big break kind of started. Me, Brian, and Brandon started writing songs together, and then they were coming off their first album, Jagged Era, and I wasn't really happy with Columbia Records at the time. I think that they were having issues with, promotion and all that with Columbia. So just like, Jermaine was like, I guess they were like, we're going to write songs for Jermaine to submit for artists, So we started just writing songs, and then they set a meeting up with Jermaine, and the idea was to really just play Jermaine songs that we would sell. You know what I'm saying? To other artists. We wrote a song for Usher, we wrote a song for Escape, we wrote a song for, It was just kind of, submitting, they were kind of submitting songs to JD, because of course they were on Jermaine's publishing company. They were submitting songs to Jermaine basically on the strength for artists. You know what I mean? And of course they demoed all the songs. So Jermaine, I guess, looked at them and was like, this sounds like an album. It sounds like it should be your album. And she said, who's the guy making these records? And it was like, it's a cat named Bryan Cox. That Noontime, Noontime, he's kind of just developing his sound and the whole nine. So he was like, I want to meet this kid. And so then I met Jermaine maybe a month later. In the process of this, I was still doing work for Noontime. So there was Absolute, there was Tony Braxton, there was Aaliyah, there was, all these projects I was working on that was bubbling. You know what I mean? They hadn't came out yet, but they were bubbling. Kind of all of a sudden, I'm thrusted in the studio with Jermaine Dupri, and we finish. He called me, we're going to finish Jagged's album. So at that point, he knew he was going to keep 4 of the songs already. There was record called. It was 4 songs, like 2 ideas. The 4 songs was Heartbreak, What You're Trying to Do, He Can't Love You, and Healing. And then we had started an idea called Promise with Gary G. Smith and my boy Bert. And then me and Jermaine, the first day we went into work, we did this song called Keys to the Range. And then maybe 2 days later, we started writing this song called Let's Get Married. And they came in and wrote the verses. And then by that time, we were like, okay, we were pretty much done with this record. And then at the end of the day, we went back to Noontime. I listened to all the demos they did. We picked a record that Teddy Bishop did called Lace You. And me and Jermaine did one more record called The Girl's Mind, and another record called Did She Say. And it kind of just rounded out the album. And that was my first complete project. And then at that time, nobody believed that Jermaine would put out a single that he didn't produce. Right? So they were having hand on me that Social Death, trying to figure out what would be the first single. And, I guess Skid Rock was really fighting for He Can't Love You. And Jermaine came into the meeting and was like, He Can't Love You is going to be the first single. And I think it stunned everybody because, I was the sole producer on that record. So my first look, at Social Death was a record that I produced by myself, and it was He Can't Love You. It came out and went #1. Simultaneously, it's a group from Houston that I grew up with, this cat named Ideal. Simultaneously, I was working on Ideal's album at the same time at Noontime, right? And me and Jonte wrote a song together, one of the first records we did together, called Get Gone. And that record came out shortly before He Can't Love You came out. So it was like, all of a sudden, this whirlwind of songs started coming out.
Yeah.
You know, it was Get Gone, then it was He Can't Love You, then it was just, Let's Get Married, then it was Tony Braxton, and then she started just flowing, and it just kind of spiraled all the way. It was like a snowball effect. It was crazy, and then look up, and now it's 15 years later, and I still don't know, I'm still trying to figure out how I got it.
Yeah. Now, a great story, and I'm glad you touched on that J.E. Heartbreak album, because, we love that album, the work you did on there, too. It's like a classic album from front to back, and still stands the test of time today listening to it, But now I just want to talk to you more about your creative process, because we talked to, your production partner, Wildcard, and he mentioned that you kind of start out, when you go in with an artist, having a conversation with that artist, and developing from there. Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I have this theory that songs are conversations, right? Like most of the records that I've been a part of that have been hit records come directly from a conversation, whether it's a conversation with an artist, whether it's a conversation amongst ourselves. You got to talk it through, in my personal opinion. I work with other writers who just are great with coming up with stuff off the dome, and Sean Garrett and Adonis and Jonte Austin are great with coming off the dome, But for me, I think my process has always been just talking it through, Because in that conversation, you find the music, you find the records, you find you find the issues that the artists have, and ultimately what they want to sing about. So I think every hit record that I've been a part of has been a conversation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From Where the Party At was a conversation with me and the guys. Actually, people understand that Where the Party At was really a song that we did originally with the Dog Pound. Well, like maybe 2 years before we brought it to Jermaine.
Yeah.
So we did the Dog Pound, and it was over the New York beat initially.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And then when we brought it to Jermaine, it was like, it's too gangster. It was too gangster at the time for what Jagged Edge, we were trying to go with Jagged Edge. And we were in the middle of making Jagged more thrill, and me and Jermaine made this track. And then we played it for them, and they was like, yo, Where the Party At goes with this track. And then they put Nelly on it, and it just, exploded. But that was a conversation that me and the guys were having at noontime, just, drinking and talking, and like, Nelly at a party, and you're like, Where the Party At? And they was like, yo, it's a song. And they wrote the song, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Same thing with, Bad Habit was a conversation I had with Kelly directly. You know what I mean? We were watching something, and her ex-boyfriend was on the screen. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And it kind of changed the whole mood of our conversation. And she had been broken up with him for a while, but he still was very much so a part of what she was going through emotionally at the time. So we ended up talking about him. Obviously I knew him well too, so we ended up talking about him for hours on hours on hours. And I said, yo, give me like 30 minutes, I'm going to write this song.
Yeah.
And I wrote Bad Habit for her. And she sang it down one take and killed it. So it was like, the same thing with Burn. Burn was a conversation that me and Jermaine had. You Got It Bad was a conversation that we had with Usher. Like, songs are birthed through conversation. So I encourage, when the studio working, for us to talk. You know what I mean? Because that's where the vibe comes in at.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. Now, talk about a little bit more about the success you had in the early 2000s. You had success with Mariah Carey, of course, and Usher, Mary J.
Yeah.
Do you think that type of success could ever be replicated, in the current day? Or was it just like the timing was right in the industry for that type of music? Talk about that.
I mean, we know that things happen in a cycle. We see it, at one point, pop music in the 80s was running the pop charts. It was running the Hot 100. Then it shifted in the 90s to, more of a hip-hop, R&B based type thing in the early, mid-90s. In the late 90s, it kind of shifted back to pop, you know what I'm saying? And then the early 2000s, late 90s, we know it flips back and forth. So you just have to do your best to be a student of the game and understand what's hot and try to fit yourself inside of what the sign of the times is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it's all about reinvention. You know, I don't believe in compromise. I believe you are who you are creatively. You know, how you was raised, you are who you are. You know, I was raised on R&B music. I was raised on jazz music. I was raised on gospel. Those are three things that are all part of my makeup. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is who I am. So I don't think I could ever compromise that learning. You know what I mean? You have to be a student of the game to be realistic on what's happening in today's time, right? So in order to stay ahead of the game, you got to know what's out there. You got to be able to place yourself within what's out there. I think that producers that are great at that tend to be the ones that be around for the longest. You know what I'm saying? So to me, I feel like timing is one thing, but I also feel like a great song is a great song. It's a great song. It's just it's just who's producing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the production technique. But a great song is a great song is a great song. I think that Confessions and Burns were just not because of the sign of the time. I think Burn and Confessions are just great written songs.
Yeah.
I think Without You, these are songs that are classic, stand the test of time. Be Without You is just a great written song. I think that Be Without You would be a hit in 2012, just like it was a hit in 2006. You know what I mean? And proof of that is, you know, we did a record for Monica called Love All Over, which is the approach is the same approach that we use, or that I use on a regular basis. It just was a great song, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was a hit. She sold 1 million copies. You know what I mean? So, to me, I think a great song is a great song. It's just a matter of who's producing it for. If the producer is really reading the sign of the times and reinventing the art of production, or the what's the word I'm looking for? Their approach.
Yeah.
Reinvent your approach to the production. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was a great song. You know, 1970, 2012. A great song is a great song. Period.
Exactly. Okay, good point. Want to ask you about a couple of songs, you know, you've had a hand in creating through the years. These are not some of the, you know, these weren't necessarily singles, but we just love these songs. I want to start out with the song by Jagged Edge, Remedy. You know, love that song. Talk about that one. What do you remember about creating that one?
Remedy is actually, when people ask me, like, what is one of my favorite productions or one of my favorite compositions, I would say Remedy all day. I remember that because me, Brian, and Brandon were really in a zone creatively. Like, we were making so many songs at that point. Remedy was just, at that point, what embodied what I had learned from producing J Heartbreak.
Yeah.
Okay. At that point, I could say I become a master at the NPC 3000 and manipulating it and dropping things inside of my sequences that I hadn't dropped in before. Like, you know, the second verse, I do like a break where the chords change and it comes back. And I did all this stuff in the NPC. I didn't do it because, you know, back then we were still using tape. I didn't use Pro Tools to edit. I was doing all my editing inside of my drum machine.
Yeah.
And what I loved about that song is the progression. The chord progression, like my favorite. The chord progression and the way that the rhythm of the beat, it was kind of like everything fell, you know, kind of like a half a beat behind. You know what I'm saying? And the melody of the record, you know, it just felt right. It's one of them records that just feel right, and I feel like, you know, I was also growing as a man personally, so I started out very young, so at this point when we were making this record, a lot of my experiences, you know, I started experiencing new things, you know, in relationships with women and things of that nature, and I think that all of that plays a part in your creativity. Yeah. I think that Remedy kind of screams sexuality.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was like the dawning of, you know, of some of my early sexual encounters, you know what I mean? And I think that it was one of the things that was kind of like, you could really feel what I was experiencing through my compositions, through the music alone, and the music screaming sex. That's really what made them come up with that concept of Remedy. You know what I'm saying? Because they heard the track and was like, oh, okay, we got to go in with this. Yeah. And so you have to put all those things together. you're talking about creativity. So, you know, Remedy didn't kind of screams the dawning of my sexual experiences.
Yeah.
Like on a grown man level, and it kind of encompassed that merged with my experience as a producer. I now believe at that point, you know, because at first, you first start producing, it's like, man, I can't believe I'm doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, believable, like, oh my God, I'm producing. At that point, my confidence as a producer had just started to blossom in a way where I was like, this is what I do. You know what I mean? It went from, you know, man, I can't believe I'm doing this to, no, this is what I do. So, you know, I'm doing it. You know what I mean?